I know that there are many of you who have questions about the state of the world. The issue is, a matrix of delusion has been created in so many people. Many people think one thing is happening when actually something else is happening that you would have never considered. You wouldn't even have thought that certain things were connected. A lot of these theories that you hear about across the internet exist simply because many people just don't know any better. I mean, I hear all these theories about what's happening, and I'll tell you, the stranger the theory, the more truth it seems to hold. The truly bizarre things, many things, are kept away from us, out of reach. But aside from the many operations that are going on behind our backs, up in the sky and below our feet, there are things that are coming that no one will be able to hide. And these are the things that we all want to look out for because they are major indicators of something else to follow. Let's get right into this as we look at some more things to be understood. The inevitable motion into a revelation of things to come. How many of you recall something quite significant happening a few years ago? Something about Antarctica and John Kerry, the Secretary of State. Remember that? Many people were curious about what was going on. He was on tour to visit several countries. Once in Antarctica, he would hit McMurdo Station on the coast and then to the geographic South Pole. Apparently, they were weathered out from going to the South Pole. And the speech he gave to everyone there was basically an ad for climate change. He wanted to talk about the ice melting. Now, how many of you believe that the scientists in Antarctica are there to study climate change? How many of you believe that? Do you know what's at the South Pole? A telescope. But not a telescope you can look through. Actually, this one is under the ice. Ice cube, they call it. What it is, it's actually a neutrino detector, the largest in the world, made up of a cubic kilometer of transparent ice and 5,000 mini-dome detectors. What this telescope allows them to see are the areas of the universe that they cannot see, because the telescopes they currently have can only see so far out. And they are trying to see what's way out there, because what they understand to be out there is something we would have a hard time wrapping our head around. As far as the ice melting, there are a string of 70 plus active volcanoes underneath the ice, and they have found things buried as they were buried in other places. Pyramids. How many of you know about the face that was apparently spotted, but they won't talk about? It's very similar to the face on Mars. You know, when they dig things up, sometimes when they show what they found, it's not what they actually found. That's for public consumption. Then there are people who argue that none of these things actually exist there. They're fairy tales. I mean, they find crazy things all the time in these ancient sites. They are digging up things that would make anyone's jaw drop. They've been on this mummy hunt lately, and they find giant sarcophagi. Of course, they aren't going to ever show you what was in them. How many of you have heard of the giant black granite sarcophagus that was supposedly discovered? You want something to look up? Look up the Serapeum of Saqqara, where they found a bunch of giant sarcophagi that for some reason didn't get used because there was nothing in them. They actually tried to pass off the story that they were used to bury bulls. And they didn't find any bulls or bull mummies, of course. The Bosnian Pyramid of the Sun. They want you all to forget about that one. They've had geologists come in from Cairo to examine it, but they say it's a natural formation. Of course they would. The Antiquities Council of Egypt is beyond corrupt. They hide everything and show you all the leftovers. I mean, they have to show you something, right? You know, with the Bosnian Pyramid of the Sun, they began excavation over a decade ago. One of the first interesting finds was the concrete, the cement of the pyramid, which after examination was found to be at least 5 times stronger and more water resistant than any concrete that could be made today. Even special orders on extra strength concrete does not compare to the composition of the cement at the Pyramid of the Sun. The energy measurements are quite strong there, and they are said to have healing properties. How many of you know about Cholula? This is actually the Great Pyramid of North America. It's in Mexico. If it weren't for the Bosnian Pyramid of the Sun, this would be the largest in the world. And like the Bosnian Pyramid, it is covered in mud and vegetation. So at first glance, it would look like a hill. You know what's funny? Back in the 1500s, someone saw this hill and said, you know what would be perfect at the top? A church. And one was built at the top before it was revealed that there was a pyramid there. Now, isn't that telling of what type of energy is in that place? And it's not holy. There's about 400 pyramids there at Cholula. Did you know that? The original pyramid builders were antediluvian, not Egyptian. Atlantis is where the original pyramid builders came from. Let me see if I can timeline this for you to give you a better understanding or perspective of what happened. In the antediluvian age, you have the Garden of Eden, Atlantis, Olympus, Asgard. These are all pretty much the same place, as it is a memory from the nations that followed it, okay? That's why no matter what the culture, all these stories about an ancient land sound similar. It was just a universal understanding that this place once existed. The people of this antediluvian world were unworshippers, meaning they didn't worship anybody. Think about that. That came later. See, all those gods and goddesses of the Hindus, the Greeks, they're all just the kings and queens and warriors of Atlantis. And they become mythology and legend. The ancient kingdoms of Peru and Egypt, those are people trying to mimic the empire of Atlantis. That's what all that is. The headdresses, the garments, the gold, the temples, the pyramids, the sun god, the moon god, all these gods. This is all Atlantean. The god and goddess worship really comes after the flood. Because keep in mind, the fallen angels are cohabitating with humans at the time of Eden or Atlantis. Even if Eden and Atlantis were 2 separate places, the time period here is important. Think about the alphabet. European alphabets come from the Phoenician alphabet, coming out of the Atlantean alphabet. You have European and Semitic tribes coming out of Atlantis to create those nations. All the weaponry forged during that time. That was all technology passed down from Atlantis. A few videos back, do you recall me mentioning the Atlantic Ocean and how it seemed to be an ocean that wasn't always there? Well, what if I told you that the kingdom of Atlantis went from Western Africa and Europe all the way to North and South America, with a few lakes and rivers and seas in between, but no ocean. North America, South America, Africa, Europe, these were once provinces of Atlantis. Then we have a deluge. The landmass gets smaller. Then there is another deluge. The same thing happens. Then another one. And then we have the biblical deluge, which sinks Atlantis. Now we have another land, which is now the Indian Ocean known as Lemuria, which could also have been Eden or the birthplace of mankind. It could have been another province of Atlantis extending to and through Australia, which is why you have evidence of Egyptian, or should I say Babylonian, or should I say Atlantean cultural remains. How many of you have heard of the Pliocene skull, or Calavera skull? It was found in a mine shaft about 130 feet deep in volcanic deposits in California. It's a human skull, which some say is genuine, others say it is a straight-up hoax, and not because it was found among plant and fauna fossils of the Pliocene era, but something they rarely mention when discussing the Calavera skull, and that is that the skull is giant. It was found under Table Mountain, and I want to leave you with this quote from The Secret of Regeneration by Hilton Hotema. It says, during the Pliocene, California and Oregon became the theater of the most tremendous volcanic activity that has devastated the surface of the globe. The valleys of the rivers in the Sierra were filled, and much of the country, particularly toward the north of California, was entirely buried in lava and ashes. Since then, the rivers, seeking new channels, have made for themselves deep canyons, leaving their old beds deeply buried under the lava. These old buried river gravels are rich in gold, and extensive tunneling into the sides of the mountains and under the old lavas has been done. In one of these old river bottoms, under the solid basalt of Table Mountain, many works of human hands have been found, as well as the celebrated human skull of the Pliocene, now so well known in connection with Brown of Calaveras. The age of these deposits under the lavas is known to be Pliocene on the account of the remains of the contemporaneously buried flora and fauna, which were almost totally unlike the flora and fauna of California at the present time. That the skull was found in those old, intact cement gravels has been abundantly proved by evidence that cannot be gainsaid. At the time it came into the speaker's hands, the skull was still embedded in a great measure in its original gravelly matrix. In this condition, it was taken by him to Cambridge, where under his charge, and in the presence of Professor Jeffries Wyman of Harvard University and Professor W.H. Brewer of Yale College, the embedding matrix was chiseled away. In and about the skull were found other human bones, including some that must have belonged to an infant. Chemical analysis shows that it is a true fossil, its organic matter being almost entirely lost, and the phosphate of lime replaced by carbonate of lime. So far as human and geological testimony can go, there is no question but that the skull was found under Table Mountain, and is of a Pliocene age. This is by far the best authenticated instance of Pliocene man which has been brought to light. There is only a presumption which weighs against it. The skull was not inferior to that of existing races.